This episode is powered by Poddex.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of MCVC. Today, I'm going to tackle another solo episode and kind of talk some sports again. Got a lot of good feedback from my NFL predictions episode a couple weeks back. Once the draft and like free agency and stuff is over, I'll probably go in and revise some of those. Some might say the same, but obviously, if there's a big trade that either a team lost a player, gained a player, sometimes that can really flip a team around. Look at the Bucks this past year. They gained a handful of players and went from one of the worst teams in the NFL to one of the best teams. And obviously, there might be some teams that I say are going to have a losing record that are going to end up making the playoffs or something. So, um, again, today, kind of diving into the NFL thing. Um, came across this article and this link probably a little less than a week ago about Unbreakable NFL Records. Um, One of these days, maybe I'll dive into some just general sports records, but um, this one specifically, there's some that jumped out at me that were kind of mind boggling. Some I knew about, some I didn't. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go through, I don't know, we'll just go through it for a little while. And see exactly how many I'm going to talk about. Maybe I'll get through all of them. Maybe I'll have to make this a two-part episode. But so yeah, just kind of diving into things here. I'm going to go top to bottom just from this list. It's from StadiumTalk.com. Familiar with them? I've read stuff from them before. Um, this was posted in November 5th of 2019. So it's like a year and a half old, roughly, a little less than a year and a half. So um, I don't know if any of these have been broken since then, but I guess we'll just find out as we go along. So from the top here, we have Mr. Brett Favre and his 336 interceptions to his career. Um, Crazy number. Being a Packers fan, obviously, I grew up watching Brett Favre. Uh, he ended up being actually had four different teams. He's mostly well known for his time at the Packers, but he actually started with the Falcons, then went to the Packers, um, decided to retire, wanted to come back. Green Bay had already moved on from him to Aaron Rodgers, so he ended up going on to the Jets, and then after that to the Minnesota Vikings, before he finished up his career. 336 interceptions. That's a crazy number, especially um, given how you never hear of anybody having really more than 10, 15 interceptions in a season. Um, Sometimes you get that once in a while. A guy just has a bad year, or it's a young guy that's just new into the league, whatever it might be. Um, it actually says here that um, a quarterback could throw 15 interceptions for 20 years, and they still wouldn't take that number from Favre, which is crazy. So, again, this isn't to knock down Favre in any way. He's obviously a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason because of winning a Super Bowl and the great things he did while he was in Green Bay, and then didn't really do a whole lot on the Jets, and then moved on to Minnesota, where I think he took them to like 1 or 2 years in the playoffs, if I remember correctly. Um, it says here as well that Eli Manning would be the closest competition to Favre, although Eli Manning is done now. So I don't know who would be next on that list, but I guess time will tell. Maybe some of these younger guys just coming into the league now are going to have high interception careers, though I don't see that happening. So sorry, Brett, but you're probably going to hang on to that record for maybe forever. Um, Moving on next, we have Emmett Smith's 4,409 rushing attempts in a career. That's a wow. That's a lot. Um, Emmett Smith, mostly known for his time with the Dallas Cowboys. Um, do, do, do. Says if Barry Sanders had stuck around for a couple more seasons, uh, then he would have potentially passed Emmett Smith's record there. So basically saying there's a chance that his record could be touched there. As far as attempts, maybe not, just because the NFL is a lot more balanced now with run and pass. I know there's some teams back in the day that all they do is ground and pound. Like back in the 70s and 80s, uh, you had a couple big name quarterbacks that would kind of be the head of the team, but um, like your Walter Payton, Emmett Smith, um, Marshall Falk, like really big name running backs that you that really just took over the entire offense. You don't really see that a whole lot nowadays. Like you have Zeke Elliott in Dallas, but they have Dak Prescott, who's a good balance there. Um, Derrick Henry. Maybe I'd say the Titans are the closest like leaning side towards running. I could be wrong on that, but just from watching games from them the past couple of years since Henry's been in the league, it seems like they've been a run-heavy offense. But now with Tannehill and kind of the um, talent he brings to the team, maybe that'll kind of balance out again. So um, I guess it'd take a running back to stick in the league for excuse me, how long was Emmett Smith in? 14, 15 years. So yeah, I don't know what Frank Gore is at even. Frank Gore might even have a chance to um, come near that rushing attempt mark. Obviously, his reps are down from earlier in his career, but again, I don't have his numbers pulled up to see if he's even relatively close to coming close to Emmett Smith's rushing attempts number. Um, So we'll move on to the next one here. We have the Buffalo Bills, who lost four straight Super Bowls in the early 90s from 1990 to 93, um, which it's crazy for a team to get there in back-to-back years. Kind of like the Chiefs just did this past year. Of course, they didn't win this year, but just to get there back-to-back years is admirable. Last time that happened, I think it was like early 2000s, like 2003, 2004 with the Patriots as well. So it's crazy to see that the Bills made it to four straight Super Bowls and lost four straight Super Bowls. Um, if I remember correct, too, they weren't very close games. Oh, it showed the first one, um, extra, extra point wide right loss in Super Bowl XXV. What would that be? 25. Um, Bills weren't competitive in the next two Super Bowl games. Average margin of defeat in those four games was 16 and a half points. Um, yeah, so I don't know who they all lost to. I know the Cowboys were pretty dominant in the early '90s, so I know at least one or two of those losses that the Bills took were from the Cowboys. But I mean, this is a record that I think is going to stand for quite some time. Not only just to make it to four Super Bowls, period, but to lose four straight Super Bowls. I'm surprised that's even happened that many times in a row, four times. I could see like one or two straight losses in the Super Bowl, but four, I don't think that's getting touched anytime soon. Um, Moving on next, we have the Chicago Bears scored 73 points in a postseason game. Holy crap. They scored 11 touchdowns in a victory against do, 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 the Redskins. A 73-0 victory. That's crazy. And it says 3 weeks prior, the Redskins beat the Bears 7-3. So for them to come back 3 weeks later and beat them back 73-0, um, wow, 73 points in a game, period. Let alone a postseason game where the competition is supposed to get tougher and tougher. Obviously, as you move on uh, from the like wild card divisional conference and up to the championship. Um, I don't even know what. Oh, in the NFL championship game. Okay. Yeah, wow, that's a crazy lopsided game then in that case. Um, I mean, it's hard to tell. 73 points is a huge number, but who knows 10, 20, 30 years down the road if the NFL is still the NFL. Who knows? Um, but as the game progresses, and it seems like it's becoming more balanced and even more pass heavy, I could see games becoming higher scoring. Like this past year, um, was the highest scoring year in the NFL ever. I think I can't remember exactly what the amount of points scored was, but I knew that the NFL had the highest scoring year it's ever had. So obviously that's trending in the right direction of getting closer to some of these numbers, like 73 points. Um, you see teams make it in the 40s and 50s. That's admirable. So another three or four touchdowns beyond that, then they'll be kind of in that 70-point territory. But again, I don't see this being touched in the next maybe 10 years. Um, again, down the road as the NFL kind of progresses and changes into whatever it might change into, maybe. But that'd be something down the road to look into again. Next is Jerry Rice's 22,895 receiving yards. Um, Jerry Rice played for almost 20 years, 19 seasons, mostly known for his time in San Francisco. Then also went on to play in Oakland and Seattle as well. Um, says that he has a lot of space in between him and the next person. Larry Fitzgerald is second all-time in receiving yards, um, and he's still active. Who knows? He might retire this year, might be back next year. But as of 2019, it says that Fitzgerald would have to play roughly 7 more seasons to pass Rice, which is crazy. I could see Larry maybe either retiring this year, maybe doing one more year, but he's getting to that point where an injury could just make him fall off the face of the earth, and he's done. Um, let's see here. After turning 30 years old, Rice had nearly 14,000 yards, which would put him in the Hall of Fame alone if he never took a snap in his 20s. That's crazy. I know that Jerry Rice has quite a few records, both career wise, regular season, postseason. Um, Yeah, he has a lot of records that aren't going to get touched for a very long time. This one, especially given that Larry Fitzgerald is the next closest guy and he's close to retiring. Um, I don't even know who else would be on pace, honestly. Um, I know OBJ had a lot of momentum early in his career, but he had his last year with the Giants. I know he had some injuries, and this past year he's been out too. So when you're missing games, let alone basically whole seasons as a player, it's hard to catch records like this if you're not playing full seasons, and especially now with how um, grueling and um, like or I want to say, yeah, like stressful on the body that the NFL is for some of these players. You don't really see a lot of them playing 15, 20 years anymore, aside from a quarterback, let alone a receiver or running back who's constantly taking hits. And as the NFL is getting safer, the athletes are also getting more stronger, smarter. Um, back in the day, it was easier to play longer just because of the space between um, just average players and elite players. Now that gap is becoming shorter and shorter. Everybody's getting a lot better, which is lessening people's careers because of how much better competition there is out there. So, yeah, again, Jerry Rice's record 22,895 receiving yards. Don't see that getting touched anytime soon. Um, Next, we have the Akron Pros. Um, 19, 20, 21. They had 13 consecutive shutouts. Wow. Um, yeah, the Akron Pros obviously don't exist anymore. Says they outscored opponents 175-0 over 13 straight games, 10 of which were wins and 3 of which were ties. So they had 3 games that ended 0-0. That's funny. Um, do, do, do. Yeah, kind of what I was saying back then. Pro football was less sophisticated, where if you could stop the run, chances are your opponents wouldn't score a point because passing wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is now. Um, yeah, and especially in today's offense heavy like era with passing and stuff, kind of how I said, the high flying scoring offenses that are existent now. I don't see this record ever getting touched, let alone coming even half of that. I don't see a team having 5 consecutive shutouts, let alone 13 or 10 or anything beyond 5. Um, even just a couple. Getting a shutout period in the NFL is admirable nowadays. You have to have a pretty damn good defense to not allow a team to score a single point. Um, just because, again, with passing, start you start your drive at the 25, you get a 30-40 yard pass in broken coverage, you're in field goal range, boom, there's 3 points, shutout gone. So um, yeah, I definitely don't see this record ever getting touched whatsoever, unless the NFL in the future takes a huge step back and turns back into a run-heavy league. I don't see this record ever getting touched. Let's see here. 2 safeties in one game by Fred Dreyer. Um, Safety is the least common scoring play in football. And since 1932, it occurs once in every 14 and a half games, basically. Um, Multiple safeties in a game are even rare and have occurred just 20 times in the last 70 years. Um, and then 2 safeties in one game by the same player happens just once in a lifetime, which again happened by Fred Dreyer for the Los Angeles Rams. Um, as this is a very unlikely uh, record to be broken, it's not impossible. You could just have a uh, defensive tackle or a linebacker who's just having a heck of a game, and the defense is having a really good game where their punter is able to put that offense within like the 5 yard line or on the 1 or 2 yard line, and have one guy come in and get 2 sacks back to back in the end zone on different drives. So although that's not a very likely thing to happen, I could see this getting broken. Um, and you can't really put a timeline on it. It could literally happen next year. It could happen next season. It could happen in 20 seasons, but it's just as likely to happen next season as it is to happen in 20 seasons. So that's why it's, again, not an unbreakable record, but it's something that is going to be, um, I guess, kind of foreshadowed, basically, depending on how uh, dominant the defense is that year, and maybe something like this could happen at that time. Next, we have Percy Harvin for the Vikings. He had a 104-yard kick return without scoring. What? Oh, okay. I'm surprised I don't remember this. Um, but anyway, so he had kickoff return that he caught 7 yards into the end zone. Obviously now, unless you have a dominant returner that they get the green light to take it out, most guys just knee it now or don't even catch it. They just let it go through the back of the end zone and take it at the 25. But I remember Percy Harvin kind of around that same time as Devin Hester. Those two were kind of the dominant punt and kick returners during that, like the late 2000s, early 20 teens. Yeah, it says that he took the ball at the 7 yards into the end zone, returned it 104 yards, and got tripped up at the 3 yard line. Um, I mean, I don't want to like that could this could easily be broken where a guy takes the ball at the 108-yard line or 109-yard line and gets tackled at the 1 or the 2 or the 3 again. Um, Not likely. Usually they take it the distance if they're going that far. Um, but again, kind of like that last one with the 2 safeties in one game, it's not likely this could happen, but it could happen again next season. It could happen 20 years from now. and it's just as likely to happen at any time. Um, I could see this happening again at some point. I wouldn't say this is an unbreakable record, but it's such an odd record that, again, if somebody's taking the ball 100 plus yards on a kick return, they're probably getting a touchdown out of it. Next, we have the Buffalo Bills 32-point comeback in 1993. Uh, I'm seen this game multiple times of them coming back over the Houston Oilers. Um, the Oilers were up 35-3 and managed to come back from that big of a deficit. Um, and especially with it being in the playoffs too, really anything that happens in the playoffs that's big like this, whether 32-point comeback or like the Bears did in 1940, scoring 73 points in one game. Um, what adds to the level of these records in the postseason is the teams that they're playing are supposed to be um, like even with them, just about. They're in the playoffs for a reason. They're, unless it's like a 1 seed versus a 6 seed, but then yet again, um, 6 seeds have taken out 1 seeds before, which again goes to show they're the top 6 teams in the NFL. For that side, well, 7 now since they changed it this year. But again, getting back to this record, 32-point comeback. Um, I mean, I could see this happening again. This record is 20 plus, well, almost 30 years old now. So 28 years old at this point. Um, Oh yeah, 93. This is part where the Bills won. It says they won it 41-38 in overtime and ended up going to the Super Bowl where they lost again. So that was the end of their Super Bowl stretch, where they lost 4 in a row. Um, what's it? Oh, okay. It says right here. So their 32-point comeback. It says the next biggest comeback is 28 points. I was gonna say I 32 points is a big margin, especially because at that point, the only way I could see coming back from a 30 plus point deficit is if that deficit is still in the first half. So if you're down like 35-0 and it's like and getting towards the end of the second quarter, and if they can go get a touchdown, make it 35-7, and then they get the ball to start the second half, make it 35-14, and then just play stellar defense and come back offensively. Um, that's really the only scenario I could see a comeback like that dethroning a 32-point comeback. Although, again, like I said, it's the NFL is such a high-scoring league now where um, if a team were to go up 32 plus points, um, usually they're pretty good at clock management, running the ball, and like not even giving the other team enough possessions to even make that happen. Because 32 points, that's 5 possessions that they have to have at least, and that's scoring a touchdown on every possession, mind you. Um, and for a team that's up 30 some points to just completely shut down, not score any points of their own, have their defense stop being stellar and holding a team to basically no points, to just completely flip the script. I don't really see that ever happening unless you have like your half your team gets injured, like your quarterback goes down, your running back goes down, half your defense goes down. But even then, like your backups are there for a reason to kind of come in and hang on to the game for you. So I don't really ever see this record ever getting broken. Again, if the NFL ever changes down the road where um, like the schemes and mechanics of the game change, maybe, but um, I guess we'll come back to that when that time comes. Um, Next, we have a 2-game streak with at least 6 touchdowns by Ben Roethlisberger in 2014. Um, Only 9 quarterbacks in NFL history have had multiple 6 touchdown games in their entire careers. Last to do it was Patrick Mahomes in 2018. Um, but yeah, so I basically goes on to say that the record is touchable, but breakable is another question. Um, I think this record could be breakable. Obviously, 7 is the record. Nobody's ever beat 7. There's a handful of quarterbacks that share that record, but nobody's ever thrown 8 touchdowns in a game, which is just unreal. That even 7 is the mark. Uh, and to have Ben Roethlisberger have back-to-back games of 6 touchdowns, um, to have somebody go 3 games in a row with 6 touchdowns, it sounds unreasonable. But again, with the way the NFL is trending, kind of being a pass-heavy league, um, with kind of the studs that are coming into the league like Patrick Mahomes, you got Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield. As these guys mature and get even better than they already are as elite quarterbacks, um, us- having 6 touchdowns in 3 straight games isn't completely untouchable. Um, I could see it getting tied for sure, having back-to-back games of 6 touchdowns. Um, but yeah, I see it getting broken eventually. And again, it's one of those records that somebody like Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, anybody could just have it just completely go off next year, 5 years down the road, whatever it looks like, and go out and break this record. So I'm gonna move on to the next one here. 1932, the Chicago Bears had 6 ties in a season. Um, from 1920 to 1973. Oh, the NFL didn't have overtime. Oh, okay. So that kind of makes sense in the sense of back then they didn't have overtime, so that obviously is going to lead to a lot more ties. Um, and I kind of like how the NFL has changed things over the past few years with overtime, kind of changing the rules a little bit, not making it that a a field goal wins the game. Both teams get a possession. Um, and then just with how they do the replays, the time, all that kind of stuff, I feel like they're kind of trending in the sense of making sure there's the least amount of ties as possible. Um, there's been a tie just about every season for as long as I can remember ever watching football. There's always at least 2 teams. I think there is 2 or 3 ties that happened this year. I know the Bengals, um, the Eagles. I can't remember what the other 2 teams were, but yeah, I want to say there's 2 games that ended in ties this year. Um, so Bears in 1932 had 6 ties in a season. I'll never see that getting touched again, especially now that the NFL has an overtime. Back then they didn't. Um, once in a great, well, I think I can remember 1 or 2 times growing up that a team had like 2 ties in a season, which is kind of crazy. So I don't see 6 ties ever getting touched again, unless in the future, for whatever reason, the NFL decides to take away overtimes. Then this might be a realistic record that could get broken, but unless that changes, I don't see it ever getting touched. Next, we have Mr. Tom Brady in 2009 had 5 touchdown passes in 1 quarter. Wow. Um, yeah, I feel like I remember seeing highlights from this game. It was a snow game, which is even more impressive because snow, rain, any kind of inclement weather, um, usually turns into more of a run-heavy game just because the ball isn't obviously as easy to throw, either with power or with accuracy. So the fact that Tom Brady not only threw 5 touchdown passes in a quarter period, but did it in a snowstorm adds even more, I guess, recognition to this record. Um, 5 touchdown passes in 1 quarter. Yeah, I definitely. I don't know. I want to say this record would never get touched, but again, with the way the NFL is trending, like I've said a couple of times now, with it becoming a run or a pass-heavy game, um, it could happen. I don't see it happening. I can't think of a quarterback right now that would um, potentially be like good enough to play that well. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of again another crazy record. Five touchdowns in a whole game is a pretty damn good game. Like you're balling out at that point. But to do it in one quarter, heck, if you did that for 4 quarters, you have 20 touchdown passes in the game. And uh, some quarterbacks don't even have 20 touchdown passes all season. So um, yeah, it's kind of another crazy record. I do see it getting broken eventually, but I don't really see any talent that's in the NFL right now that would do this anytime in the near future. In 2008, Sebastian Janikowski had a 76-yard field goal attempt. Hmm. This is an unofficial record, but there is video evidence that it happened and the kick landed about 10, 11 yards short. Um, Though the NFL doesn't keep track of the longest missed kicks in history, it's hard to imagine that anyone attempted one longer, and it's hard to imagine that anyone will ever attempt one longer. I mean, that's fair. Uh, a 76-yard field goal attempt. That's kind of like I don't even know why they would try that. Obviously, it had to have been like right before a half. There's like 2 seconds left. But even at that point, why not try a Hail Mary or something? But also, Sebastian Janikowski is, I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame, but or if he will be in the near future. But amazing kicker, so maybe they just put their faith in him that, hey, you have a chance to do this. It says it ended up landing 10, 11 yards short. So at that, um, he would have made it from 65 ish yards out, which would be the NFL record. So I guess it doesn't surprise me. Maybe the wind was in his favor, whatever it might be. I, I I will agree with that being probably the farthest field goal attempt that will ever happen or be attempted, especially with how much faster players are getting. Like I, the human body can only get as strong to a certain point, unless you have a guy that just goes on steroids that just makes him boot balls that far, with crazy wind to his back or something. But again, with longer field goals, usually kickers will kind of draw back farther so they can get more of a run up on it. But again, like I was saying, how players are getting faster and faster, by doing that, you're taking the chance of it getting blocked. So I don't know. I don't really ever see a 70 plus yard field goal attempt ever getting um, tried again. I, the the record of 63 yards is definitely going to get broken someday. But as far as an attempt beyond 70, I don't ever see that happening again. Um, we have next teams going 11-5 but missing the playoffs. Hmm. This happened to both the Denver Broncos in 1985 and the New England Patriots in 2008. Um, uh, do, do, do. In 1985 is the year before the Broncos ran off on 3 Super Bowl appearances in 4 seasons, and in 2008 is the year that Tom Brady was injured for the Patriots. Okay. Um, changes rules midseason. Um, yeah. So for an 11-5 team to miss the playoffs, doesn't really happen a whole lot. I know this last year. There's some 10-6. I know the Dolphins at 10-6 missed the playoffs, so that's one game off of 11-5. Um, I don't see this getting broken. I don't see a 12-4 team missing the playoffs unless you'd have to have a lot of teams go either match that and beat them with tiebreakers or do better than that, which would just be an unreal year. and especially with how like divisions work and stuff like that, you'd almost have to have you'd have to have the top two teams go 12-4 or better in every division, which has never happened. You usually have a couple of teams that'll break 10 wins. Like you'll have a team go like 13-3 or 14-2 in a division, and then the next will be 10-6 or 11-5, just because the team that's above them that has more wins has beat them, so that makes them have more losses. Um, so yeah, I don't know, and it kind of brings up an interesting point too, kind of like looking back at this past year again, how like the Dolphins missed the playoffs at 10-6, but um, well, the Washington football team won their division at 7-9. Um, so it's obviously a good thing that they have divisions, in the sense of you win your division and you're in the playoffs scenario. I don't think they should ever change it where if a team is second in the division is going to miss the playoffs at like 12-4, and there's a team that's 8-8 that's going to actually get in. I don't think that they should change it and be like, oh, the 12-4 team is in, because well, you should have won your division or should have won an extra game that would have put you in as a wild card elsewhere. Um, so yeah, I could definitely see this getting tied again. Like I said, Dolphins were 10-6 this past season and missed the playoffs. Um, but yeah, I could definitely see it tied. Definitely don't see it getting broken though. Um, Next, we have 10 straight championship game appearances in Otto Graham for the Cleveland Browns. Um, the streak happened before the AFL NFL merger. Graham played just 10 seasons. Um, okay, so this is just specific to one player. Um, well, this again is just 2019. Tom Brady and the Patriots have a streak of 8 straight AFC Championship games. Um, so I could see, is Tom on a streak still? No, he wouldn't be. No, because um, the last year was the Chiefs and the um, 49ers, so that would have broke Tom's streak at would have been 9. So he'd have been one short of breaking that record. So in that case, I don't see it getting broken. I was just thinking of where Tom Brady was at. He'd be the one closest to breaking this record. Um, and since well, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is at 2 right now, 2 straight Super Bowls, unless he manages to put up Tom Brady numbers and accolades and make it to another straight or 8 straight Super Bowls for the next 8 years. I don't see this ever getting touched. Again, it basically just talking about Tom Brady here, and it doesn't really mention anybody else, which uh, Patrick Mahomes would have only been a rookie in this year anyway, so they're not even thinking about what he brings to the table. But um, yeah, I don't really see this happening, especially again with how even the NFL is getting now, where you don't really see a lot of repeat winners or a lot of repeat Super Bowls. Um, in fact, there's usually every year there's 2 to 5 teams in the playoffs that weren't in the playoffs the year before. So there's just constantly turnover with these teams, whether it's them getting free agents, whether them getting a stud out of the draft. A team that should dominate and is a Super Bowl favorite has a um, all-star player go down for the year. Like there's always different scenarios that happen. So to be able to predict and say, oh, this team or that even more specifically this player is going to make it to 10 straight Super Bowls is just unreal. So Otto Graham, I think you got this one locked down at 10 straight championship appearances. Um, Next, Baltimore Ravens allowed only 165 points in a season in the year 2000. That is unreal. Ray Lewis in his prime. I shouldn't even say in his prime. he was obviously still good at that time, but I feel like more mid 2000s was Ray Lewis's prime. But at 16 and a half points all season, um, that is crazy. Because you're or 165 points, so yeah, that's about 10 points a game that you're allowing all season, 10 and a half roughly. And it says that the next closest is 22 points higher, so that'd be 187 points in a season is the next closest. Um, I don't see this one ever getting touched either, as again talked about this a handful of times now with the NFL becoming more of a balanced and even closer to pass heavy league. You're going to have higher scoring games, which is going to make it less of a chance for teams to only allow 165 points in a season. Um, most teams are averaging anywhere from 20 to nearly 40 points a season now, or 20 points a game, which you have to cut that into half or fourth, depending on how many points that they're scoring to even come close to having a defense that shuts them out like this. Um, yeah, so I feel like this is a record that's going to stand for either a very long time or never get even close to getting touched. Um, Next, yikes. 4 consecutive games of throwing a pick six. Matt Schaub for the Houston Texans in 2013. Um, Matt Schaub ranks 134th all time in interceptions, but ranks 30th all time in pick sixes. Um, do do do. Through a total of 8 interceptions in his 4 game streak. Do do do. Yeah, so 4 straight games throwing a pick six. Uh, that that's kind of a crazy record, especially now again with how more athletic the players are becoming every year. Where if there's a pick that does happen, you have offensive linemen who are running pretty damn fast, faster than they should be running to catch these defensive backs and tackle them, or receivers for that matter. Like thinking back to this past season where DK Metcalf chased down Buda Baker, saved the pick six from happening. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of an odd, like very specific record to the point that I feel like it could get broken and you wouldn't realize it. Obviously, like and these NFL analysts and commentators in the booth have so many records in front of them that if a quarterback were at 1, 2, or 3 consecutive games of throwing a pick six, they'd be like, "Oh, this guy better watch it. Like he might tie the record or break the record or whatever it might be." Um, so that's the thing is it's not an impossible record to break, but just with how I guess self-aware quarterbacks would be nowadays from letting something like that happen, um, especially with how quick teams are to like bench people. So I think it gets to the point now where if a quarterback throws 2 consecutive or has 2 consecutive games of the pick six, they're obviously not having a good game. They probably have multiple interceptions. Their team is losing, so they bench him. So then that um, brings the other guy in and stops the record right there because they um, aren't playing in the next game. So I don't see this getting broken. Again, it's not an impossible record to break, but just with how teams manage or like owners and like coaches manage their teams now, I don't think that they would allow something like this to happen ever again. We'll do a couple more here and then I'll wrap up. I'm just going to kind of scroll through and see if I can pick out. Okay, this is impressive. Um, Steven Goskowski for the Patriots from 2006 to 2016, so 10 years, he made 479 consecutive extra points. Um, Which I mean, so in 2015, the extra point line got moved back to the 15-yard line, and there's been a lot more misses obviously since then because it's what does that make it a so 15 25 plus 7, so it's a 32-yard field goal every time now. um so obviously you're going to see a lot more misses now, which means this is never going to get touched again. um for somebody to at this point make that many consecutive extra points at 32 yards is would just be un, not even possible. You have guys who miss high 20, low 30 field goals, let alone extra points. Um, so Gostkowski kind of, um, I guess, came into the league at a good time to be a good kicker because he had, what would that make it, 9 years where he got to kick extra points from the 2 yard line where unless they were blocked or the dude just absolutely shanked it or had the laces facing him or something, they extra points were never missed before 2015. So this is definitely one that I'm going to say is not going to get touched ever. Like not even close. Maybe I could see somebody maybe I won't even say getting half of that. I could with where the extra point line is at now, 100 to get 100 consecutive without a miss would be impressive. Let alone damn near 500. Um, so yeah, Steven Gostkowski, unless they move the extra point line back to the 2 yard line or just make it closer at all, it's not really ever going to get close to being touched. Um, we'll do one more here. See if I can find. Oh boy, we'll end on a bad one. Jim Hardy for the Chicago Cardinals back in 1950 had 8 interceptions thrown in a single game. Wow. I think I've done that on Madden once or twice, but I never thought that that'd be possible in real life. Um, it says again, this game took place back when offenses were run heavy. Um, so his 8 interceptions came on just 39 attempts. Yikes. So every like one, every one or every 4 or 5 passes, basically he's throwing an interception that game. Then, um, yeah, it's again, it's just another crazy one that you have too good of athletes as receivers and tight ends now, and especially with the tight end position evolving into kind of a hybrid of, um, I mean, 10 years ago, the tight end position was more of a block first, and once in a while you go out for a 5-10 yard pass. But now tight ends are evolving even more, which is giving quarterbacks another option, another weapon to go to. Um, the fact that this has stood for 70, 71 years now goes to show I don't think it's ever going to get touched. 8 interceptions of one game. I don't like half of that is you're having a bad game. I feel like most quarterbacks that get benched at 3 or 4 interceptions and put if they ever threw that many in a game. So I don't see 8 ever getting touched again. So yeah, definitely gonna end on that one. Just as far as being one that's definitely going to be unbreakable. Um, yeah. So again, today was just kind of just briefly going through some NFL records. I just kind of pulled them up at random. Some I had to kind of read on the spot just to kind of get a little bit more understanding of them. Some I was kind of familiar with. Obviously, the one with Brett Favre throwing, what was it, 393 interceptions in his career, 373, 336. I think it was 336. I'm going to go up now because it's 336, 336. But yeah, so um, yeah, if you guys like this video, just briefly going through some records, let me know if you think um, anything I said about some of these either having a chance of being broken. If you think, okay, no, that's never going to get broken, and here's why, or one that I think would never be broken, and you're like, okay, yeah, this guy can do it or this team can do it, definitely feel free to comment. Um, I definitely would enjoy going back through this video again in the future, highlighting back on some of the ones that you guys give feedback on. Um, and I didn't even make it halfway through this list either, so I might have to pick up where I left off in the next, I don't know, couple days, week, month, whatever it might be. I'll come back to this eventually and pick up where I left off. So again, appreciate you guys always showing love, supporting the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy the content. Also, don't really ever mention it, but we do have an Instagram account, TikTok, a Twitter. We're on Anchor. Anchor is where we have all of our um, audios for our episodes put. So feel free to check all those out. Show some love on all of our social media platforms, and drop in the comments too if there's a topic you want either myself to explore. Otherwise, with Mike as well. Um, this is only the second time I've ever done an episode by myself, but in the future I'll probably do more. Just as there's some topics that I'd like to dive into that maybe Mike doesn't either know as much about or isn't as interested in, and then he might do the same thing as well. So, um, yeah, again, looking forward to the future of the podcast, and thank you guys for tuning in. See you next time.